Let's talk about gift knitting. So we're in the run-up to Christmas now, and you cannot move on social media for posts about what people are gift knitting for their friends and family, what people's favourite patterns for gift knitting are, etc, etc. And that's lovely, we all love a bit of a Christmas craft, but I can't be the only one who's been burnt by gift knitting in the past and has vowed to not fall into that trap again. I think there's this sort of expectation that if you knit or you crochet or you embroider or whatever your craft is, you will naturally want to share that with people, and that the process of doing so is, you know, fun and fulfilling and it'll save a bit of money. I've never really found that to be the case. So I thought, let's have an honest conversation about what the reality of gift knitting really is. So maybe if you're somebody who has gift knit before and found it quite stressful, then maybe you can relate to some of the things I'm going to say. Or maybe if you're someone who hasn't tried gift knitting before and you're thinking about it, maybe this will just give you some food for thought in your decision-making process. I do want to say, I know some people have been gift knitting for generations. They love it. Their friends and family love it. And if that's you, power to you. I'm jealous. This video probably doesn't apply to you. Feel free to skip it. But for the rest of us, let's have a bit of a chat about it. So before I get into my sort of list of gripes about gift knitting, I want to give you my experience of gift knitting and my sort of qualifications for speaking on this topic at all. So I've been knitting for just over 4 years now. And I think my first year of knitting, I just knit for myself. And then the second and third year, I got really into gift knitting. So I kind of had that idea of being like, this will be a really fun thing to do. People will appreciate my gift knits. I'll save a bit of money. This is like a very mutually beneficial situation to gift knit. That year, I committed myself to about 4 birthday present gift knits and 6 Christmas present gift knits. And those 6 were all for the same group of families, so all due at the same time. So let me tell you, that was a very stressful experience. Not one that I'm eager to repeat anytime soon, but I learned a lot from it. So let's sort of get into what I learned in that process, what might apply to you, and why, kind of the reasons why I'm never going to do that again. So the first one is time. And this is kind of an obvious one. So as I said, I did about 4 birthday presents and 6 Christmas presents, and those were all in one go. So the birthday presents were kind of spread out, and within those, there was some element of maybe I was too ambitious with the deadline, and that added a little bit of stress. But those experiences paled in comparison with the disastrous hand knit Christmas of 2022, when I was trying to make 6 Christmas presents within 2 months before Christmas. The patterns weren't ridiculously complex. I made 2 cowls and I made 4 hooded scarves. Now the hooded scarves were probably slightly more complex than they needed to be. But the thing is, I don't do plain patterns. It's not what I enjoy doing. I really hate like endless stockinette. It drives me insane. And if I had to knit in plain stockinette for the rest of my life, I just would not knit because I find it so tedious. So I was never going to do a plain pattern. I think the hooded scarves was slightly too big of a project for the amount of time that I had to do them, but I wanted to do something special, because if I wasn't able to do something special, then what was the point in knitting a present at all? Do you see what I mean? So I gave myself 2 months before Christmas to do it, which was not nearly enough. So by the end, I think I finished them by late January, a month late for Christmas. And in the end, I didn't even do the 6 myself. I did 5, and my husband very kindly knitted the last cowl. But even he, I think, found it really stressful to have this deadline, and I was like tearing my hair out for like the whole 2-month period. That's kind of a lesson, a tip, I suppose. If you are planning to gift knit, then you need to leave enough time. But at the same time, if I were to really leave enough time for that, so in the end it took me 3 months, and that was rushed and stressful. So I probably would have needed at least 5 months to do it comfortably, which would mean I would have had to start in August. And the thing is, for some people that's not a problem. Fine, they just love that style of knitting. For me, to spend nearly half my year knitting things for other people, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. Because also, just timescale wise, if I was knitting my Christmas presents 5 months early, that would mean I'm missing out on Halloween knits, I'm missing out on autumn knit, I'm missing out on like other Christmas knits, because obviously all my time needs to be on these Christmas presents. I mean, it just doesn't work for me. It might work for you. Doesn't work for me. I'm somebody who has a million whips on the go. I have an incredibly long list of patterns I want to do, and an even longer list of notes in my phone of ideas I want to bring to life, because I do like to do my own sort of patterns and concepts. That would just take away far too much of my time to do it. And of course, plus that's just the Christmas gifts. If you're also adding in birthday gift knits and stuff like that, your whole year would be spent knitting for other people. For some people, they would love that. For me, the balance just isn't there. I'm either too selfish or too slow of a knitter to do that. and it just doesn't work for me. I don't think it's true to say that gift knitting is never worth the time spent, but you have to make that decision for yourself. And if you've got big aspirations for yourself, maybe you write patterns, maybe you do stuff like that, then gift knitting en masse can be a massive hindrance to that. So the second point is around the recipient of the gift. So I've gifted many knits over the years to friends and family, and I just want to say up front, I'm not accusing any of those gift recipients of being ungrateful or that I regret knitting for them particularly. So any friends and family watching, love ya. This isn't personal to you, but I have made some gifts that in retrospect, I think, although they were very gracious in receiving them, was that gift that suitable for them? Was it the sort of thing that they would wear? Possibly not. I think that's something that when we're thinking of gift knits, we sometimes get carried away with the things that we like to knit and the things that are doable to knit in the time. And we're not really thinking about what would be useful to the person. And this is a difficult thing because, as I've literally just said about the timescale wise, you don't have that much time to knit people presents. There just isn't time. Unless you were someone who wanted to spend your whole year doing it, then, you know, power to you. But generally speaking, there isn't enough time to knit in a perfect world what you would like to knit. So there's always a risk that what you do knit has limited use to the person. So one example of this is, I think, to be honest, the only way to really do a successful Christmas gift knit within a reasonable amount of time, so 2 months would be reasonable to get across the board a knit for everybody, which would have to be like a beanie or maybe a pair of mittens or something like that, which is lovely. But obviously it massively depends on your gift recipients. But I know my friends and family, if I just gave them that gift year after year, it wouldn't necessarily be a functional gift. And even though it would probably be the thing that would take the shortest amount of time of all the options, it still would be 2 months solid work for me for something that people are going to be like, oh, cool, thanks. Put down sort of thing. And the other point is that sometimes you just make a misstep. You really think something's going to suit somebody and then it doesn't. And this can happen with all gifts. This isn't exclusive to handmade gifts. You think someone's going to really love a gift and then their response is like, oh, great. And you know, maybe you're like, oh, well, actually I put a little thought into that, or that cost me quite a lot of money. And I just thought that you would like it more. And it's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's just a miscommunication here. But when you've knitted it and you've poured so much time and effort into it, that sting hurts a lot more. And that's not to say that people should feel bad for not being like falling over themselves for gifts, but I just think it's like that moment where you're like, wow, like this was worthwhile when in my mind I thought this was something you really wanted. Now I see that it's not something that you really wanted. I'm thinking that actually the balance wasn't worth it, which never makes me resentful of the gifts that I've made, but makes me discouraged from making them in the future unless I'm really, really sure that that specific thing is what that person wants. So my third point is that it will probably not save you money. Now, obviously it depends, right? And if you're doing small projects and you're trying to use up your scrap yarn, then fair enough, you might very well save money. But I think sometimes a lot of us go in with the aim to be like, well, I'm just going to use my scrap yarns and whatever. And then when you start thinking about it, maybe start planning out a project, maybe you realize that the yarns that you have enough of aren't necessarily the right color or the right composition or whatever, then you end up buying new yarn anyway. So I've definitely had that experience. And that's partially due to the fact that I never buy yarn speculatively. I always buy yarn for a project, but I always buy slightly too much yarn to make sure I'm not like caught short. And then I end up with the remnants of that yarn. And so basically my whole yarn collection is like remnants of other projects, but there's never quite enough to make something substantial with it. And that's fine for scrappy projects. You can just sort of muddle it together. But I think when you're making especially a gift knit and you want to do something nice, you want to do something a bit polished, sometimes even if you plan to use your scrap yarns, you will end up being like, oh, but actually maybe I'll just like get that yarn instead, because then at least it will all be the same color and I know that they'll like the color and I know that they'll like the texture and whatever else. It's just one of those things that accidentally happens quite a lot. And that's not to say that you're ending up spending more than if you bought their present, but it's just often not the money saving thing that you think it's going to be. And then of course, plus the labor costs, you're generally not saving much time or effort at all, probably expending far more. And then there's the other side of it, which is like, depending on obviously who you're knitting for, whether the yarn that you have in your collection is suitable. So for example, I knitted one of my friends a baby blanket earlier this year, and I had all the will in the world to use up some of my yarn that I already had. But then when I started thinking about it, I was like, well, I want something that's going to be soft on the baby's skin and I want something that's going to be machine washable, and nothing in my stash fit that bill. So I ended up buying new yarn for that, which I then now have excess of that yarn as well. So the cycle just continues and continues, but that is another consideration as well. And finally, just the overall summary of the thing and where it left me, that really stressful period, is that it just burns you out. Like it just puts too much pressure and stress on you. I mean, it puts stress on your hands because you're just knitting. Can't tell you the late nights I had in December 2022 when I should have just been enjoying the Christmas thing. I should have just been watching fun. I mean, I was watching fun films, but I should have just been chilling. And I wasn't able to chill at all. There was not a moment of chill because I was just constantly trying to churn out these knits. And then just when you're finished, you're just like, oh, now I'm just tired. I'm zapped. And for me, like, knitting is a creative outlet for me. I know for some it's more like a meditative practice. For me, it's more of a creative outlet. So it's something that I kind of feel like I need a lot of my energy for. Otherwise, if I'm feeling burnt out with it, then I just feel like, oh, I can't bother to do anything. And I do think if I had spent those same hours knitting something super creative, I wouldn't have felt as like mentally drained as I did. But because it was like, for me, it was like cables. And I don't love cables, it turns out. It was really, really tiring and not really a fun thing or a good idea for me in the long run. So that might apply to you as well. So yeah, I think those are my sort of main gripes about gift knitting. Not going to apply to everybody. Some people love it and power to you if you do. But for me, it's not really about the gift knitting itself. It's just about my suitability for gift knitting. As I said, I'm either far too selfish or far too slow or a bit of both to be a proficient and dutiful gift knitter. It's just really not in my biochemistry. But if you can relate to anything I've said, maybe you'll find the same. I'd love to hear what your experience of gift knitting are. If you're an avid gift knitter, have done it for years and you've found a trick to make it really work for you, then please let me know in the comments. If you've also had a stressful experience, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. In the background, I'm still cracking on with my anatomy sweater. So hopefully by the time we next catch up, I will have finished my sweater and I can show it to you and show you the process that I did to make that. But in any event, if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you could like and subscribe, and I hope to speak to you soon.